Day, December 20th, 1944. The snow fell heavily across the Ardennes forests, blanketing the landscape where American and German forces were locked in one of the most desperate engagements of World War II. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, General Dwight D. Eisenhower reviewed maps, intelligence reports, and casualty figures, all pointing to the urgency of halting the German counteroffensive known as the Battle of the Bulge. Amid the tension and strategic calculations, a message arrived from one of his most volatile subordinates, General George S. Patton, commanding the Third Army. It was not merely a report on troop movements or operational assessments, it was a declaration that would stun Eisenhower and ripple through the highest levels of Allied command. Patton demanded the firing of an officer, framing the situation in absolute terms, and added an ultimatum. If this did not occur, he would resign his command. The timing and content of Patton's message were striking. In December 1944, Allied forces were stretched thin across multiple fronts in Europe. Supplies were constrained, communications were under strain, and weather conditions made movement treacherous. Yet Patton, known for his aggressive tactics, unorthodox thinking, and fiery temperament, chose this moment to confront his superior. His career had been defined by bold actions, rapid advances, and a willingness to push both men and machinery to their limits. This ultimatum reflected a combination of personal conviction, battlefield pragmatism, and a complex understanding of command responsibilities within the hierarchy of World War II military operations. Patton's insistence on the removal of the officer stemmed from his broader philosophy of leadership. He believed that decisiveness, competence, and moral clarity were essential in officers, particularly during critical phases of World War II campaigns. Any hesitation or incompetence, in his view, could cost lives, slow momentum, and jeopardize objectives. In his experience, commanders who tolerated mediocrity risked the effectiveness of their units and the integrity of the mission. Therefore, when he identified what he perceived as failures in judgment or execution, Patton interpreted them not merely as errors, but as existential threats to operational success. The officer at the center of the dispute was involved in a logistical and tactical decision that Patton judged to be obstructive. During the winter offensives in Europe, supply lines were crucial. The movement of armored units, artillery, and infantry required precise coordination, and any delay could have catastrophic consequences. Patton had observed patterns that, in his assessment, indicated incompetence or caution beyond what the situation demanded. His approach to leadership was rooted in rapid adaptation and aggressive engagement, and the perceived inability of certain subordinates to meet these standards triggered his ultimatum. Eisenhower's reaction was shaped by the broader context of World War II command structures. As Supreme Allied Commander, he had to balance multiple national armies, coordinate logistics across vast distances, and maintain political as well as military cohesion among American, British, Canadian, and other Allied forces. The notion that a single divisional or corps-level officer could provoke a direct confrontation with Patton created a dilemma. Eisenhower needed to preserve authority while avoiding disruption to the delicate chain of command. The ultimatum was therefore not only a challenge to a personnel decision, but a test of the boundaries of military hierarchy during one of the most intense campaigns of the war.
Patton's approach was consistent with his reputation for directness and unfiltered communication. Throughout World War II, he had been known to speak plainly to both peers and subordinates, often disregarding conventional diplomacy in favor of operational clarity. His belief that the lives of soldiers and the success of missions depended on uncompromising leadership standards guided his interactions. By presenting the demand as a binary choice, fire the officer or face his resignation, Patton emphasized the urgency of decisive action, framing the decision as a moral and practical imperative rather than a matter of administrative preference. The incident highlighted a fundamental tension within the Allied command structure during World War II. Military operations required both initiative and compliance, audacity and coordination. Commanders like Patton thrived on the freedom to make rapid, aggressive decisions, yet the larger operational framework imposed limits, necessitating alignment with strategic objectives, coalition politics, and broader logistical constraints. Patton's ultimatum forced Eisenhower to weigh the risks of challenging a subordinate renowned for effectiveness against the need to maintain discipline and authority across multiple armies in the European theater. Understanding the stakes requires appreciation of Patton's achievements leading up to December 1944. The Third Army had executed rapid armored advances through France, demonstrating exceptional coordination, speed, and tactical innovation. Patton's leadership style emphasized mobility, surprise, and relentless pressure on German forces. These successes earned him both admiration and scrutiny. While effective, his methods were often controversial, challenging conventional doctrine and the expectations of Allied planners. The ultimatum to Eisenhower can be seen as an extension of Patton's operational philosophy, applying the same decisiveness demanded on the battlefield to personnel matters. The officer whose removal Patton demanded was involved in decisions that affected troop readiness, supply distribution, and timing of assaults. In Patton's assessment, delay or error at this level could cascade into broader operational failures, undermining months of strategic planning. Within the context of World War II, where engagements often involved combined arms coordination and precise timing, the perceived stakes justified, in Patton's mind, extreme measures. His insistence on immediate action reflected both the operational pressures of winter campaigns in Europe and his personal calculus of leadership effectiveness. Eisenhower's stunned reaction reflected not only the content of the ultimatum, but the manner in which it was delivered. Military command traditionally relied on structured channels, deliberation, and consensus, particularly within a coalition framework. Patton's demand bypassed diplomatic nuance and left little room for negotiation, presenting a stark choice that threatened the stability of command relationships. Eisenhower was compelled to respond carefully, balancing respect for Patton's proven effectiveness against the necessity of preserving authority and maintaining cohesion among Allied forces. The confrontation illustrates broader themes of leadership during World War II. Effective command required a blend of strategic vision, operational competence, and the ability to manage complex interpersonal and inter-unit relationships. Patton's approach emphasized operational competence above all, reflecting his belief that battlefield results ultimately justified personal risk and unconventional methods. Eisenhower, responsible for coordinating multiple national armies and sustaining political as well as military alliances, faced the challenge of integrating such personalities into a coherent and disciplined chain of command.
Patton's ultimatum also underscores the personal dimension of World War II leadership. Generals were not simply administrators. They were often active participants in shaping the tempo and direction of operations. Their decisions affected lives, influenced morale, and carried political weight. In the high-pressure environment of late 1944, with winter conditions compounding logistical and tactical challenges, the personality and judgment of commanders had immediate and tangible effects on the outcomes of campaigns. Patton's willingness to leverage his resignation demonstrates the degree to which personal conviction could intersect with operational decision-making during this period. The broader operational context adds further insight. The Battle of the Bulge was a surprise German offensive aimed at splitting Allied forces, capturing key supply depots, and forcing negotiations favorable to the Axis. American and Allied troops were initially caught off guard, creating a situation of extreme urgency and requiring rapid countermeasures. Within this context, any hesitation, delay, or misjudgment by subordinate officers could exacerbate vulnerability.
Patton's demand for accountability and his readiness to resign highlight the intensity of pressure faced by commanders during one of the most critical phases of World War II in the European theater. Patton's communication reflects both his strategic mindset and his understanding of psychological influence. By presenting the ultimatum in stark terms, he forced consideration of the consequences of inaction. His reputation for achieving results through aggressive maneuvers lent weight to the threat, signaling that the Third Army's operational effectiveness could be compromised if leadership deficiencies were tolerated. This approach exemplifies the interplay between personality, authority, and operational necessity that characterized high-level decision-making during World War II. Historical accounts indicate that Patton's insistence was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of confrontations with superiors. Throughout World War II, he frequently clashed with peers, staff, and political authorities, balancing personal temperaments with professional effectiveness. His ability to secure results despite or because of these confrontations reflects both his operational skill and his willingness to challenge convention. The ultimatum to Eisenhower demonstrates the high stakes and intensity of leadership decisions in wartime, where operational success could hinge on the decisiveness and judgment of a single individual. The incident also highlights the tension between strategic oversight and operational autonomy in World War II. Supreme Allied command required coordination across national forces, logistical networks, and multiple theaters of operation. Yet battlefield commanders like Patton were entrusted with significant discretion to exploit opportunities and respond to dynamic conditions. When these responsibilities intersected with interpersonal conflict and questions of personnel competence, the result could be dramatic, as evidenced by Patton's threat to resign. The balance between autonomy and accountability was a constant challenge in coalition warfare, with real consequences for the execution of campaigns. Patton's reputation for speed and aggression informed both his operational decisions and his approach to leadership challenges. His Third Army had demonstrated an unparalleled ability to exploit breakthroughs, often moving faster than intelligence or supply lines could fully support. In this environment, any delay or misjudgment by subordinate officers could have cascading effects, delaying advances, endangering troops, and altering the strategic picture. Patton's insistence on maintaining standards and his readiness to enforce accountability, even at the highest levels of command.
Eisenhower's response had to account for multiple factors: preserving authority, maintaining the cohesion of a multinational force, and ensuring operational continuity during one of the most critical phases of the European campaign. The shock of the ultimatum lay in its bluntness and the immediacy of the threat. World War II leadership required careful balance between flexibility and discipline, and Patton's direct confrontation illustrated the friction between individual initiative and institutional hierarchy. The episode also underscores the interplay between personality and historical circumstance. Patton's charisma, reputation, and battlefield success gave weight to his demands. His willingness to confront authority with an ultimatum reflects the extraordinary pressures of World War II leadership, where split-second decisions, personal conviction, and operational risk intersected. At the same time, Eisenhower's measured consideration demonstrates the necessity of balancing assertive personalities with broader strategic imperatives. The underlying principle in Patton's ultimatum was the relationship between competence and consequence. During World War II, errors in judgment by officers could result in significant casualties, missed opportunities, or operational setbacks. Patton's insistence on removing perceived inadequacies reflects a philosophy in which accountability was non-negotiable and failure to act decisively by superiors was intolerable. The episode demonstrates how concepts of responsibility, authority, and operational integrity were tested under the extreme conditions of the European theater. Throughout World War II, the careers of generals were shaped as much by personality, decisiveness, and interpersonal skill as by formal strategy or planning. Patton exemplified this dynamic, leveraging reputation, results, and audacity to influence decisions at the highest levels. His ultimatum to Eisenhower illustrates the fusion of personal authority and operational necessity, highlighting the complex human dimension of command in total war. The incident also illuminates the broader pressures on Allied command structures in late 1944. With winter offensives underway, troop morale under strain, and supply lines stretched, the margin for error was narrow. Commanders faced the dual challenge of achieving tactical objectives and managing complex chains of command involving multiple national forces. Patton's insistence on decisive action regarding personnel illustrates the intensity of these pressures and the weight of responsibility carried by commanders on both sides of the communication. Patton's approach reflects a consistent pattern in World War II military leadership, an emphasis on initiative, speed, and decisiveness. In fast-moving operations, delays could be fatal, and tolerance for incompetence was limited. The ultimatum demonstrates how personal judgment and operational philosophy intersected with the formal structures of authority, creating moments of tension that could have profound implications for both command relationships and battlefield outcomes. The incident highlights the intersection of personal conviction, operational necessity, and institutional hierarchy. Patton's readiness to resign if his demands were not met demonstrates the intensity of his commitment to standards of leadership and the centrality of accountability in his command philosophy. Eisenhower's stunned reaction reflects the unusual nature of the confrontation and the challenge of integrating such strong personalities into a cohesive command structure during one of the most critical campaigns of World War II.
The stakes involved were not merely personal or administrative. They carried tangible consequences for ongoing operations. Decisions regarding personnel affected troop readiness, command efficiency, and the execution of maneuvers critical to halting the German offensive. Patton's ultimatum forced consideration of these operational realities while challenging the conventional procedures for addressing perceived failures in command, illustrating the tension between immediate battlefield demands and the protocols of a multinational military hierarchy. The episode exemplifies the dynamic tension between authority, competence, and operational effectiveness that characterized high-level decision-making during World War II. Commanders were judged by results, and the capacity to act decisively under pressure often determined both success and career trajectory. Patton's ultimatum encapsulates this dynamic, demonstrating how personal conviction, professional judgment, and strategic urgency could collide in dramatic and consequential ways. The confrontation also provides insight into the challenges of coalition warfare. Eisenhower had to balance the interests of multiple national forces, maintain coordination among Allied commands, and ensure that operational decisions aligned with broader strategic objectives. Patton's demand, delivered with characteristic bluntness, tested the limits of negotiation and authority within this complex environment, highlighting the intricate interplay between individual initiative and collective responsibility in World War II. The context of the Battle of the Bulge amplifies the significance of the ultimatum. German forces had launched a surprise offensive aimed at splitting Allied lines and capturing key terrain, creating a crisis that demanded rapid, effective response. Patton's insistence on accountability and the threat of resignation reflect both the urgency of the situation and his personal calculus regarding leadership standards. The episode illustrates how operational pressures could intensify conflicts between personalities and institutional norms, with potential implications for the broader course of the war. The human dimension of leadership is central to understanding this incident. Patton's approach combined tactical acumen, personal authority, and an uncompromising standard for subordinates. Eisenhower, responsible for maintaining strategic cohesion, coalition harmony, and operational oversight, faced the delicate task of integrating such a forceful personality into a broader command framework. Their interaction exemplifies the complex interpersonal and institutional challenges that defined leadership in World War II. Patton's ultimatum underscores the intersection of battlefield urgency and personnel management. Errors in judgment or delays in command could have immediate and lethal consequences during intense operations. His insistence on decisive action reflects a leadership philosophy in which operational effectiveness took precedence over bureaucratic procedure, demonstrating how individual initiative and responsibility were magnified in the high-stakes environment of World War II. The incident also reveals the influence of reputation and past performance on authority. Patton's history of aggressive, successful operations lent weight to his demands, creating pressure on Eisenhower to consider the practical implications of ignoring the ultimatum. This dynamic illustrates how personal credibility, proven effectiveness, and battlefield results could shape decision-making at the highest levels of command.
The confrontation between Patton and Eisenhower demonstrates the delicate balance between operational autonomy and institutional hierarchy. Field commanders required flexibility to respond to rapidly changing conditions, yet Central Command had to ensure cohesion and alignment with strategic objectives. Patton's ultimatum exemplifies the tension inherent in this balance, highlighting the challenges of leadership in complex, multinational military operations during World War II. Patton's approach emphasizes the role of personal conviction in leadership decisions. His readiness to risk his career to enforce standards reflects a belief in the primacy of competence and accountability in wartime command. Eisenhower's reaction illustrates the challenges faced by senior commanders in managing strong-willed subordinates while maintaining operational effectiveness and coalition cohesion. The episode illuminates the human and organizational dimensions of World War II leadership, where decisions carried immediate tactical and long-term strategic consequences. The stakes involved extended beyond individual personalities to operational effectiveness of entire armies. Decisions about personnel affected the ability to respond to enemy actions, coordinate complex maneuvers, and sustain momentum during critical campaigns. Patton's ultimatum represents the intersection of personal authority, operational necessity, and institutional responsibility, illustrating the pressures and complexities of command in one of the most pivotal periods of World War II. Patton's history, reputation, and battlefield success informed his belief in decisive leadership. His willingness to confront Eisenhower directly demonstrates the intensity of his commitment to standards of competence and accountability. The incident highlights the tension between individual initiative and hierarchical authority, revealing how personal conviction could shape military decision-making under the extreme pressures of World War II operations. Eisenhower's stunned response reflects the unusual nature of the confrontation and the challenge of integrating a forceful, independent-minded subordinate into a multinational command structure. Balancing operational necessity, coalition diplomacy, and personnel management, he faced a complex decision with implications for both immediate tactical outcomes and longer-term command relationships. The incident also underscores the centrality of accountability in wartime leadership. Patton's insistence on removing an officer perceived as ineffective demonstrates a philosophy in which operational results were paramount and tolerance for failure was minimal. The confrontation illustrates the pressures faced by senior commanders in World War II, where decisions carried immediate consequences for troops, operations, and strategic objectives. The tension between operational autonomy and institutional hierarchy is a recurring theme in World War II leadership. Patton's ultimatum exemplifies the challenges of balancing personal initiative with adherence to broader command structures, highlighting the complex interplay of personality, authority, and strategic necessity. High-stakes decisions in wartime often magnify the influence of individual judgment. Patton's willingness to threaten resignation reflects the extraordinary pressures and responsibilities borne by commanders during critical operations. Eisenhower's response demonstrates the need to manage personalities, maintain cohesion, and ensure operational continuity in the midst of crisis. The confrontation highlights how leadership in World War II involved both operational skill and interpersonal negotiation. Commanders were required to manage complex chains of command, coordinate multinational forces, and make decisions under extreme uncertainty. Patton's ultimatum illustrates the challenges of balancing personal conviction with institutional authority, a dynamic that shaped outcomes across the European theater. Operational urgency and personnel management intersected in this episode. Errors or delays in leadership decisions could have immediate tactical consequences, and Patton's insistence on decisive action reflects the pressures of wartime command. The confrontation underscores the importance of competence, accountability, and personal responsibility in the high-stakes environment of World War II. The role of reputation and past performance in influencing authority is also evident. Patton's history of aggressive, successful campaigns lent credibility to his demands, demonstrating how battlefield results could shape decision-making at the highest levels. Eisenhower's consideration of the ultimatum reflects the complex calculus of leadership in wartime, balancing personal credibility, operational effectiveness, and institutional cohesion. The incident exemplifies the challenges of coalition warfare. Eisenhower had to coordinate multiple national armies while managing personalities, operational priorities, and strategic objectives. Patton's ultimatum tested the limits of negotiation and authority, illustrating the interplay between individual initiative and collective responsibility during World War II. Winter conditions and the intensity of the Battle of the Bulge amplified the stakes. German forces had launched a surprise offensive, creating a crisis requiring rapid and effective response. Patton's demand reflects both operational urgency and personal commitment to leadership standards, illustrating how extreme circumstances intensified conflicts between personalities and institutional norms. The human dimension of leadership is central to understanding this confrontation. Patton combined tactical acumen, personal authority, and uncompromising standards. Eisenhower faced the challenge of integrating such a forceful personality into a cohesive command structure while managing the broader responsibilities of Supreme Allied Command. The delicate balance between respecting operational expertise and maintaining institutional authority was a defining challenge of World War II leadership. Patton's insistence on decisive action, even at the risk of resignation, underscores the ways in which personal conviction and professional judgment could influence the conduct of war at the highest levels. The context of December 1944 magnified the significance of this confrontation. The Battle of the Bulge had created an unprecedented crisis in the Ardennes, with American forces under intense pressure from German armored divisions exploiting gaps in the front lines. Rapid counterattacks, resupply under fire, and coordinated maneuvers were essential to prevent a collapse. In this environment, the effectiveness of subordinate officers became a critical factor, and Patton's insistence on removing an officer who failed to meet his standards reflected both operational necessity and his unyielding philosophy of command. Patton's approach was consistent with a career defined by aggressive tactics, rapid movement, and relentless pressure on the enemy.
He believed that hesitation or incompetence among his subordinates could have disastrous consequences, not only for individual missions, but for the broader objectives of the Third Army and the Allied advance into Germany. His ultimatum to Eisenhower reflects a mindset in which operational integrity and results were paramount, and conventional considerations of hierarchy or diplomacy were secondary to battlefield outcomes.